Welcome to American Sunrise Early Edition. I'm Jake Novak. This is a Tuesday. Thank you so much for joining me. And again, thank you for watching on the Getter and Rumble platform. So many other platforms you can watch this program on. Also, the America's Voice News website, on X. There are so many other options, and I appreciate everyone who takes the time to watch both live and also recorded. But please join us live. It's better that way. Also joining us right now is Daily Signal senior producer and the host of the Problematic Women podcast, Virginia Allen. And Virginia, I think a really interesting story breaking, sort of as the evening began, a little bit late breaking story, is that we have Pam Bondi, the Attorney General, basically starting the process of convening a grand jury to look into the Russigate hoax conspirators. So again, a question that you and I have been asking for a while, will anyone be charged? Will anyone be punished? We're getting some answers, or at least the beginning of that process. And I think another spicy aspect of this, Virginia, is that it looks like, based on what I'm hearing, not confirmed, that this grand jury would be seated in Florida and not in Washington, D.C., where the jury pool is, shall we say, a bit tainted. What's your take on all this, Virginia?
We're favorable, no doubt, to go to Florida, really where real Americans live, instead of Washington, D.C., the swamp, where, I can't talk it entirely. I do live here, but as a resident, I can confirm it is indeed full of swamp creatures. So smart to take this down to real America in Florida. But, that question of, is there enough evidence here to indict? Well, that's the reason for a grand jury, is to look at all the evidence, to understand the situation, to look at those facts and really make that decision of, okay, do we need to move forward in a way that, first off, issuing indictments, and then, of course, does there need to be that criminal hearing of actually moving forward to say, okay, there need to be real consequences for people who were involved in this. We're waiting. And I think, this is something that's going to take time. It's going to take probably a decently long grand jury investigation to really look at all this evidence, to dig through it. But one thing is for sure is the American people want answers, and Pam Bondi seems very determined to find them.
Yeah, that was great advice you just gave about patience. I know it's really hard to, especially in light of the Epstein stuff, to tell our viewers and tell the American public that they're going to have to be patient about this. But this is a grand jury process. It takes a while. And hopefully this thing will go judiciously, no pun intended. But people need to understand that this process, hopefully if it's carried out as well as it should be, is going to take some time. And hopefully we'll just get periodic updates. Speaking of competing jurisdictions, like we were talking about jury pools in D.C. and Florida, let's talk about the situation going on with Texas and a few other states right now. Not only is Texas Governor Greg Abbott pursuing the arrest of these Democrats who have fled the state so they can stop this redistricting effort, but he's also thinking about slapping them with accepting bribery charges, because a lot of them, as the logic would follow, have gone to Illinois, New York, some other places, and received free housing, free food allowances, in order to work against the Texas efforts at redistricting. That's an interesting little new caveat. Here we are talking again about another story where I have to ask the question, is anyone going to go to jail over this? Are people going to get punished?
Well, I think, if Texas Governor Greg Abbott has it his way, yes, that there will be real consequences, because these are elected officials. They've been elected to do a job, to represent the people within their districts in the great state of Texas. And for them to simply say, hey, we don't really like what's going on in our state, so we're just going to leave, is about the most un-American thing that these individuals can possibly do. So there should be real consequences for that. Now, who knows what those consequences will end up being, but I think Governor Abbott is incredibly smart here to be applying this pressure and be saying, hey, look, Democrats, you cannot get away with this. You can't just throw a tantrum because we don't like what you're doing. This process of redistricting, and this has been done since the 1800s. There's nothing new about this. Democrats and Republicans fully partake in this practice. And so even if they don't like it, it's fully legal, it's fully allowed, and they need to return to Texas and do the job that the people of Texas have elected them to do.
Yeah, you talked about temper tantrums. And Virginia, I know you have a podcast called Problematic Women, and I know it's a fun play on words, but Texas Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett has been trouble for everyone, for her own party too, with her often very fiery and often vulgar comments. And she did it again yesterday when asked about this redistricting situation as a national issue. Check it out.
Because the Supreme Court has paved the way for half the stuff that we see that's going on. Listen, Donald Trump is a piece of okay, we know that. Yes, he is. But in a functioning democracy, he still would not be able to get away with this. But he's been able to get away with this because the House Republicans are complicit. He's been able to get away with this because Senate Republicans are complicit.
Virginia, I know using curse words against President Trump will always get you applause from a certain audience. You know, Robert De Niro always does it at award shows and everything. It really feels like we're back in fourth grade. But I'm not sure Crockett is helping her cause by doing this kind of stuff. I mean, that was the point I was trying to make before. I think she's hurting the Democrats very much by doing these kinds of things. It really makes people think, yeah, you know, I don't care if we lose this person.
I think she's been hurting the Democrats for a very long time. She's very loose with her tongue. She says what she wants to say. She uses vulgar language. And quite frankly, she's unprofessional. And I think a lot of Americans see right through that. I think she's playing to a pretty extreme far left base. And it seems like maybe it's worked well enough for her to get elected. We'll see if it continues to work for her. But I do think a lot of her Democrat colleagues are frustrated with her lack of decorum, to be quite frank.
Yeah, and she's a result of gerrymandering and redistricting that didn't go in the way that the Republicans should have thought about it. Because, you know, no one talks like that when they're an elected official to an office like the House or the Senate if they're not in a very safe state or very safe district. I mean, she was speaking to people in her district. It's been gerrymandered in such a way that she never has to worry about it. And frankly, the people that she doesn't also really have to deliver for the people in that district. Doesn't matter. They're pretty much told who their representatives in Congress are going to be, and it's almost like a captive situation. Now to Virginia, a real captive situation. I know that you personally have been covering the situation in Gaza for the Israeli hostages, and I know you've been in contact with the families of at least one of the hostages. But and people have been seeing these pictures. But as agonizing as that is, I was wondering if you can see why Prime Minister Netanyahu and his cabinet are looking to end this war with Hamas. And yes, that will endanger the lives of the hostages. But as I remind everybody watching this program, this war was started to get rid of Hamas after the atrocities that they not only committed on October 7th, but have been committing for almost 40 years. And, you know, this is one of the things. If you just tell people that taking hostages is going to get you what you want, then they're just going to keep taking hostages, aren't they?
They absolutely are. And I think it's really important to understand the full picture and just kind of be reminded of who is the enemy that Israel is up against here. They're fighting Hamas. This is a radical Islamic terrorist group that, quite frankly, doesn't care if they live or die. They obviously have zero value for life, as we see in the case of hostages, like you see on the screen there. That gentleman, last name's David, digging his own grave, what he says he believes could be his own grave, his bones poking out through his skin. I mean, just incredibly horrific, incredibly tragic. And when you're fighting an enemy that's willing to do that to another human soul, you have to take a very, very aggressive approach. And one of the problems is that as the Israeli military has gone in and they've taken out so many top Hamas leaders and officials and fighters, there's been a lot of concern that, of course, as we know, a lot of pockets of Hamas have survived. But then beyond that, there's concern that Hamas has been going into the refugee camps and has been recruiting more fighters. And when you think about that situation, people are living in a refugee camp and they're hungry, they're lacking purpose, they don't have jobs, and you have Hamas come in and say, hey, we'll give you food, water, and we'll kind of give you a mission, a purpose. And so it's a very rich environment for them to be recruiting more fighters. I think the Israeli government recognizes this. They recognize, look, if we're going to fully remove the threat of Hamas permanently, there is no such thing as just leaving a few pockets of Hamas in place. No, they have to be completely eliminated to eliminate that threat. And also, quite frankly, to free the people of Gaza as well, to allow them to have a hope and a future, because with Hamas in place and ruling Gaza, there is no hope and there is no future for the people of Gaza.
No, and again, easy for us to say we're not the family members of these hostages, but this is what happens in war, and you can't allow hostage-taking terrorists to dictate the safety of your entire society. Virginia Allen from the Daily Signal, host of the Problematic Women podcast. Thank you for not talking like Jasmine Crockett on the show, although that might get you some clicks. But have a great rest of your week.
Thanks so much, Jake. Appreciate it.